Zodiac signs and exes. This is definitely a situation that can cause some problems. So in this video, I'm going to go over how each zodiac sign tends to behave when it comes to their exes, and I will reveal the top 3 signs most likely to remain friends with their exes. I will also go over some possible solutions if this comes up in your relationship. And last but not least, our poll question of the week was related to this topic, so I will go over the results of that along with some featured comments, which are always a don't miss. So no more wasting time. Let's go. Now, before going into each sign, there is one point that just goes across the board. If there are kids involved, of course, most people are going to find a way to stay connected and be the best parents that they can possibly be for their kids. So that's less of a personality preference and much more of a do what is right for your kids situation. So I think we can all understand, and we all probably see eye to eye on that scenario. Now, when it comes to Aries, the thing is, Aries is really an all or nothing type of personality. If they are into someone, they usually don't waste any time moving forward. And once the relationship is established, it is full speed ahead with passion and connection. So if for whatever reason the relationship doesn't work out, remaining friends isn't really even a thought for Aries. They aren't saying, no, I would never be their friend, and they're not the types to say, let's stay in each other's lives. When an Aries is done with a situation, they move on to their next adventure. No hard feelings, usually no grudges unless their ex was crazy, but staying friends and hanging out and being in each other's lives, no, not usually. Aries moves on. They don't let grass grow under their feet, especially while they're standing next to an ex. Not to mention, if you're friends with your ex and you're dating them, they're not really going to be too happy about that because it's time spent focusing on someone other than them. And for them, that is not an exciting scenario. Now, when it comes to Taurus, when a Taurus is in love, they fully invest. They give their all, their loyalty, their devotion, their emotional expression. It's really all in for them. So if it doesn't work out, usually it's not the most amicable break. They really just slowly fade into being friends. A Taurus is very decisive and very clear on what they want. And when they aren't getting it, that is usually when the relationship ends. So once something is over for them, it is pretty much over, done with. Not to mention, because they are so devoted in relationships and trust is such a big thing for them, once they've started dating someone else, that person gets their full focus. Now, because they are loyal, yeah, they may be cool with an ex or two, meaning they won't ignore them in public and they might like a happy birthday post, but hanging out, more than likely, no. And if the person they're in a relationship with is too wrapped up in an ex's life, that will be a cause for concern for them, to say the least. Now, when it comes to Geminis don't dive into relationships. Well, they don't dive into commitment. So they may be dating for a while before it gets really, really serious. So more than likely, they will have established a friendship before the love becomes some deep, long-lasting commitment. So with them, if the relationship doesn't work out, the foundation was much of the time built on a friendship first type of scenario. So they're for sure not only understanding if you have exes as friends, but more than likely they will too. Now, this doesn't mean that they won't have some questions if you do have exes for friends, but it does mean that they will be much more open-minded and understanding about the scenario, because more than likely they are either in or have been in that same situation themselves. To them, this is not that serious of a topic. If you still get along and you have fun and you're cool with someone, why not be friends with them? More times than not, they don't see it as an issue. Now, Cancers will do their best to be understanding in terms of at least being open to the conversation if you do have an ex as a friend, but it's not something that they're going to instantly be cool with. Cancers really do try to not be the bad guy or the bad girl, so when they break up with someone, after their emotions recalibrate, they usually don't hold a lifelong grudge unless, of course, their ex was really shady. So they may have a conversation or two with an ex, usually for closure or to hit them up and say, can I get that shirt that I left over your house? But over time, that fades. And although they aren't holding a grudge, they're also not calling them to hang out or to catch a movie on the weekends. So they will be cordial with an ex, but friends, not so much. And if you're cordial with your ex, they'll usually try to be pretty cool about it. But if there's anything past cordial, their Cancer claws are going to come out and they're going to want some answers. And if the answers that you give them they don't like, well, you are getting snipped. That can absolutely be grounds for dismissal with a Cancer. So they can be open to it, but a conversation will definitely be necessary. And more than likely, they will want to meet this person and get a vibe. And then that vibe will heavily influence what their next step will be. Now, Leos are going to look at this topic and say, who has time for this drama? They might be friends with an ex or two, or they might not. And sure, you might be friends with an ex or two, or you might not. And for them, they're really not interested in it as an issue unless it actually becomes an issue based on someone's inappropriate behavior. A Leo Leo is in a relationship to experience being in love and all that it has to offer, and they don't really have any problem with anything unless it has proven to stand in the way of that experience. So a rule across the board about it, not really, but they can be cool with it as long as it's actually cool and it doesn't get in the way of their happiness. Now, Virgos, they more than likely are not really going to have exes as friends. As acquaintances or someone that they're cordial with, yes. Even though Virgos can hold a grudge if they want to, usually they can separate their emotions from their intellect, and once something is over romantic relationship wise, they can see you through a different lens. But they also respect boundaries in terms of if they're in a relationship, they will understand that the energy of that relationship needs to be protected, so they will instinctually know what lines to not cross, and they will want the same respect from you. If they are single, you may see them hanging out with an ex, but if they're in a relationship, they usually are trying to find time between work and their relationship to keep that relationship going. So fitting in an ex as a friend isn't even an option. So more times than not, this won't come up for them. And if it does, they will approach it from a logical perspective. Now, if their moon is water, if their moon is Cancer, Pisces, or Scorpio, then they're not even going to entertain this idea. But if their moon isn't in water and it does come up for them, they will approach it from a logical perspective. They will get all the necessary information to assess the situation, and then they will make a decision based on the individual circumstances, not just a blanket rule. Okay, now Libras. Initially, you would think that Libras would be more likely to be friends with their exes because Libras are pretty open-minded and they can be social, but the truth is Libras have a hard enough time mustering up the energy to consistently want to hang out with the person that they're actually with. Libras need breaks from people. So odds are, if they're in a relationship, juggling their time between that, work or school, family, and anything else on their plate, that's enough for them. In the rare scenario where there was one relationship where the friendship bond was so strong that it held tight after the relationship, sure, they might be open to it, but that is a highly unlikely scenario. And if you're friends with your ex, they may have some questions, and if everything checks out, they won't forbid it, but it also won't be their favorite thing about you. But the topic itself won't be high enough on their priority list for them to really give it much energy. Now, Scorpios. Scorpios are absolutely all in or all out with everything they do. They also do their best to approach any subject from a mature perspective, but more than likely, because they do give their all to love, if it ends, well, that connection is done, and they leave it right where they feel like it belongs, in the past. They do honor connection though, and if there was one special ex that they had a bond with that transcended the romantic, then they may reach out on holidays or birthdays or special occasions. But Scorpios are very clear on, if you are in a relationship, there needs to be clear boundaries, so they won't be hanging out with an ex, and if you are, they will absolutely see that as a problem. But they are similar to Libras and Leos in the fact where they really don't have time or energy for drama. So if that friendship means that much to you with your ex, they will be happy to let you go and be friends with your ex. So this is one of those topics where if it's too much potential for drama, they're just not having it. Now, Sagittarius. They are naturally open-minded, but they also naturally move on when they break up with someone. So if they are single, they may have an ex or two hanging around once in a while because more than likely they are still cool with them. But if they're in a relationship, they naturally see certain boundaries as a part of being in love and being respectful. So even if they are cool with an ex, they won't be hanging out with them simply out of respect for the person that they're with. Now, they won't write their friend out of their life either, but they will have respectful boundaries, and they will definitely be open to having a conversation with the person that they're with to hear them out and hear where they're at with it, and then they'll make adjustments accordingly. If the person that they're with is friends with an ex, then they're not outwardly going to freak out, but they will take note and they'll assess the situation, and if it's at all shady, then you will get the Sagittarius axe. But more than likely, they won't find themselves in that situation either, because like Aries or Leo, their concerns are rarely connected to anything from the past. They're all about having fun in the present moment and being excited for what the future has in store. So for them, exes won't receive any negative energy, but they probably won't receive that much energy at all. Now, Capricorns. Okay, Capricorns can be tricky on this type of situation because they tend to make their own rule book about most things, meaning if they, for some reason, have a situation where they have a friend of theirs that's also an ex, then they will be okay with it because they know the situation and it's past their standard of if it's shady or not. But if the person that they're with has an ex as a friend, then it can range anywhere from some questions to be asked to all hell breaking loose. So Capricorns can have a double standard at times when it comes to this topic. Overall, they will say that they absolutely understand if someone has an issue with this. And Capricorns usually are the types that if it's over, it's over. However, Capricorns also let very few people in. So if an ex just so happens to remain a friend because of a trust connection and loyalty connection, but they just didn't work out romantically, then they are similar to Virgos where they can separate the two things. But they do understand it is a topic that will deserve some attention. And like I said, if the person that they're dating rolls up with a friend talking about we used to sleep together, well, let's just say the conversation won't end there. Now, Aquarians are much more similar to Geminis in the way that they take their time getting to the place in a romantic relationship where it gets really serious. So they do usually establish a strong friendship first. So when it comes to them having a friend as an ex, they're thinking, why wouldn't I? If this person never did anything intentionally to hurt me, or if we did have some drama in the past and we broke up, but we're both past that and we can still be friends, then why wouldn't we be friends? They would also be pretty annoyed and even confused with the person that they're with if that person had a problem with them being friends with their ex, because for them, they're just thinking, why don't you trust me? And if you're friends with your ex, then they may have a few questions for you, but they're not going to approach the situation from a closed-minded perspective. So they will give you the benefit of the doubt that they also expect you to give them. So this is a scenario to them that really isn't that big of a deal. Now, Pisces, if they are single, in theory, they can be friends with an ex, but usually for them, if something ended, it didn't end on very good terms, so it's not very likely for the friendship to be an option. This is because they get very emotionally invested. So if something breaks down, there's usually emotional repercussions that they don't want to revisit. So if they were ever romantically involved, it's hard for them to see you as just a friend, even if enough time has passed. So more than likely, a Pisces being friends with an ex is something that in theory they would say, well, it depends, or maybe I'd be open to it, but in practice, they're just not wired that way. They like for the person that they're with to be focused on the relationship, and of course the person will have friends, and that's fine, but if one or more of those friends were at some point romantically connected to them, then that's not something that they're just going to be okay with. So they would rather avoid it altogether, and they will have no problem avoiding being friends with any of their exes as well, especially if it means it's going to bring more strength to their relationship. Now, when assessing this sort of topic, it's all about the blend of the chart. The sun sign, the moon sign, the rising sign, and even Venus may play a role here. But in this video, I'm taking each energy and explaining what part it would play in that assessment. For example, a Pisces with Scorpio moon, Aries rising, and Taurus Venus is much more likely to not have exes as friends, and they would more than likely have a problem with the person that they're with being in that sort of scenario. But a Pisces with Aquarius moon, Gemini rising, and Venus in Pisces more than likely would be cool with the scenario, or at least be open-minded about the topic. So the blend of the chart is what matters. But all things considered, when it comes to the top 3 signs most likely to have exes as friends, they are as follows. Number 3, Leo. Number 2, Aquarius. And the number 1 sign most likely to have exes as a friend or friends is Gemini. Now, as you all know, I do a weekly poll related to the topic of the week, and this week's question was, when it comes to the person that you're in a relationship with being good friends with their ex or exes, you, number 1, are not at all bothered. Number 2, are uncomfortable and need to have a conversation about it. Number 3, you're fine with it as long as you've met them and you've given the okay. Number 4, you are not having it. This is a deal breaker. And number 5, you're cool with it as long as you are both friends with them. And the results at the time of recording this were 12% not bothered, 35% uncomfortable and need to have a conversation about it, 17% fine with it as long as you've met them and have given the okay, 23% not having it, this is a deal breaker, and 12% cool with it as long as you are both friends with them. So it looks like 35% uncomfortable with it and need to have a conversation about it is definitely the way that the majority of people feel about this topic, which is represented by WTF What, who said, being on civil terms is a sign of maturity and good. Being on friendly terms, however, requires more context. How did it end? Was it mutual, etc.? Then there were definitely those of you that went with the not at all bothered situation, like Simply Amanda, who said, I am not at all bothered. I am not the gatekeeper of my partner's life or their mama. As long as there is trust between him and myself, go for it. Then of course there were those of you from the not having it crowd, and I thought Classy Camille expressed this perspective very clearly when she said, there is no conversation that needs to be had about that, and I don't need to meet anyone. If you're still good, bad, or kind of friends with your ex, get out my face and go kiki in theirs. Peace. So Camille clearly has no time for X games. And there were definitely a few warnings coming from the comments, like Tariq Thomas, who said, I have been in this situation before. I have dated someone who was friends with their ex and they kept having to set boundaries. And a few months later, we break it off and they're engaged. And Denise Figueroa, who said, there's always going to be chemistry on some level. Play with fire and don't be surprised when someone gets burned. So when it comes to exes and a relationship, as you all can see, it is a topic that does deserve some attention. Trust is the foundation to a successful, loving, long-lasting relationship. And understanding how the person that you're with views this issue will give you better insight into how to handle it if it does come up in your relationship. When you love someone, protecting the connection is extremely important. And the best way to do that is by making sure to not give energy to any situation or circumstances that you know has the potential to cause conflict in your relationship. Now, that being said, people do have different perspectives. They have different lifestyles. They have different life situations. So it all comes back to communication. Letting the person you love know what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And also hearing them out as they express what works for them and what doesn't work for them. The absolute most important thing is not trying to prove to them why their perspective is wrong or trying to prove to them why your perspective is right. That's not a connecting conversation. Instead, try and have compassion for where they're coming from. Then both of you do your best to come to an agreement that works for both of you. Not forgetting that an agreement requires compromise. You having enough compassion to give a bit, them having enough compassion to give a bit, and you two meeting in the middle. That way both people feel heard and no one feels like they're the one that's always making adjustments for the other person. But if you are in a relationship and this does come up and you haven't initially established for yourself that this is just a deal breaker altogether, then trust that your love and your connection is strong enough to motivate you to put the relationship as a priority and start the conversation from there. If both people are operating from that perspective and with that as their foundation, then there is no ex or any other energy that will break that connection down. Okay, so there you have it, how each sign of the zodiac handles exes. Thank you so much for weighing in on this topic and sharing your thoughts. Keep your eyes out for next week's question. And remember, I am a firm believer that you can be with anyone if you're in love and both of you are committed to growing together, having great communication, and always doing your part to stay connected. You know what I always say, love. That's all, and that's enough. I hope you all enjoyed the information. If you did, don't forget the baby tap. Make sure to let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and hang out with me. I love you guys, and I will see you in the next video.